Great. So welcome back to East Asian Management. We've gone through and we've talked about many different topics. There's two different groups that have a bunch of files they've been working on. Hopefully today we will talk about how to help those groups develop their surveys even more. Other than that, we have talked about many different things. Introduction to cultures. So how about Pia, can you divide cultures into different dimensions or researchers that have identified cultures? What can you say about that? What should you know about that?
Yeah, we had Hofstede.
Good, Hofstede.
Very different dimensions like masculine and feminine, things like power distance.
Power distance?
I can't think of the other ones right now.
Good.
We also had Hofstede that first name with
Good.
the 15 personalities.
Yes, that is not a cultural dimension. That is talking about your individual culture and personality and characteristics. But yeah, it should be related. Great,
Yeah.
great.
And,
MBTI, Carl Jung's research theories, yes.
and the 1,000 minutes, but I compared the students, I forgot the name of the researcher.
10,000 hours.
Yeah.
That's basically just talking about the more you practice and develop in a certain thing, the more likely you will have success. Good. Anybody else in the classroom able to talk about the two other main theories from Hofstede, whoever is out there, and the other cultural dimension specialists? This is freaky. You know, somebody's here, but I don't know who they are. This is kind of cool. Anybody? Jacob here, who's Ulugbeck? There's 6 people online. Any of you? Ulugbeck, can you comment on other cultural dimensions? One. Going twice. Oops. So
as they are power distance.
Yes. So we heard of masculinity, femininity, which is kind of screwed up. Most people don't understand that. It's got nothing to do with your gender, so to say. It's more related to your career aggressiveness versus your relationship focus. They're saying the masculine is career aggressive and feminine is more relationship focused. A Canadian researcher specialized in helping clarify that. But I don't know, and I need to learn more about the European style. I pronounce the word Gert Hofstede, the names probably incorrectly. There's other international experts also from Europe talking about that. Anybody remember some of those other researchers? Weber is a little bit different. He is talking about how business develops. This is talking about motivation, management and motivation, not just the culture yet. So what we were studying is that maybe you can't see online very well. I'm just summarizing. How do you manage in East Asia? Before we talk about that, we need to review how do you manage, period. And so in the 1920s, Abraham Maslow said you manage based off of people's motivations, which is based on this. Then you had in the 1950s, the Hawthorne studies. Basically, somebody turned the lights on and they got people working more. And then they allowed them to continue to work for many hours with the lights on, and they turned the lights off and they started to work harder again. Because after several hours, if you have no interaction, they started to decrease in the productivity. So they just changed the lights again. Even with the lights being turned off, people started working harder again. And the idea was the workers thought as long as somebody's around and they care, they'll work harder. But if people are not showing, if management's not showing they really care or interact, then the workers basically lose interest and work less. And then we also had Herzberg, which was talking about intrinsic or extrinsic and hygiene factors and some of the basic things you needed to work. It was each one was developing. We came into McGregor in the 1980s. McGregor was focused on theory X. he was saying some people just don't like to work, and you have to like say work, 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 or kick them in the butt. He was actually saying it's popular in the Philippines, where but it's not a bad thing. It was a good thing. If you have the manager looking over them saying, oh, we could do this or with this. What about this? That basically shows a very caring father helping oversee everything the child is doing. If you're thinking about a Canadian father, I would think that would drive me crazy that close. But in Asia, it's considered a good thing to be that close. That's why they feed them by hand and things like that. And so it was a good thing in the Philippines. It's a good thing to have that Y theory of management, which is, yes, you want to work, you give them opportunities, they'll work any way they can. The X theory is they don't want to work, so you need to look over them and push them a lot. So he was talking about that. But he understood in the 1980s that there were other cultures who had to change for that. And the first culture he started to notice was the Japanese culture. The Z culture. What do you think that is? Why is it the Z pattern? X is one theory saying workers don't want to work, you need to push them. Y theory is workers want to work, just give them an opportunity and they'll do well. But then they came up later with the Z theory. Any guesses what that was? Remember what we talked about? Boogeymen Online, do you remember? Whoever's there? Z was talking about generally at the bottom. You start at the bottom. Everybody in a Japanese organization, they will come up with an idea and they'll propose it to their manager. If it's good, it will go to their manager. If it's good, it will go to the next level, next level, next level. And then it will go up to the executives, the CEO, and the board members. And then if they like it, the whole company will implement it. But it will go back down to the Z, and it keeps going that way. It takes a lot longer, but it gets everybody aware of the details and buying into the details. Then there's other theories like the equity theory. Basically, you give people ownership of something and they will do more. Or the idea of the reinforcement theory. You give positive reinforcement, like you give them a bonus, you give them a reward, you give a class grade, they will do more. The negative reinforcement theory is basically saying if you don't do it, you go to jail. If you don't do it, you get a bad job. If you don't do it, you get some bad position. So there's many different theories, and many of them are listed here. Again, Hawthorne studies, Maslow's studies, Herzberg's job satisfaction, McGregor's theory, X and Y, theory Z, expectation theory, equity theory, reinforcement theory. There are many. And it goes on. There's different types of managers. The idea of in North America, this was created. They were saying the participative management is here. And then at the other extreme, maybe I should make this a little bit, shouldn't be spending too much time on this. But they're saying the free rein style is where an executive just hires people to work and lets them do anything. And that's the style. And they were saying that this is the European style, the French style, the free rein style, the laissez-faire style. The opposite would be the Asian style, again, proposed by the North Americans, the Western people here. And they were saying the East Asian was the dictator or the autocratic. Those people are just saying one person has control and everybody has to do what they say. No questions asked. It sounds bad here. It sounds bad here. Because it's created, it's proposed by somebody from a completely different culture that doesn't really understand it. And so if you actually go to East Asia where we are, nobody's going to say, I am the CEO of a company, I have the dictatorial or the autocratic style of management. They will say, I have the fatherly style. I have the motherly style. I take care of the company like my family, like everybody here is my kids. And so I'm rewarding them, I'm taking care of them. If the company has problems, we all share in that. If the company does well, we all share in that. They will say good things. Patriarchal or mattress. What's it called? What's that? What's the mother? Motherly style. Matriarch, something like that. You guys understand. And then the other style, again, in the French area, they thought it wasn't as good as the participative style. However, now that many years have gone by, you see Google allowing executives to just work on any projects they want, at least one day a week, 20% of the time. understanding that you have good people, let them do anything, and just guide them for continued growth. So again, these are biased depending on who you're talking to. This is summarizing the details. This is talking about so many different research articles are talking about how to manage and things like that, but almost all of them are still biased. They're all still prejudiced. They're all still generally wrong because of cultural differences. And this is saying, again, in here, there's a story talking about how one person from one area is an expert in management, but he goes to another area like in Japan and it won't work. Just like Maslow. Most people in the English world know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, saying you have to start with the basic things and then eventually you get up to the individual, what's it called? The self-realization at the top. But in Japan, for example, being yourself is actually bad. You want to be part of the group. The more you are part of a family, the more you're part of the group, the more success you have. And so it's flipped, it's the opposite. And we keep going through a lot of research like that. Here's more stories talking about it, and lots of, Hofstede, Herzberg, two-factor more motivational theories. Overall, it's identifying people need to learn what is your culture and what is the culture of somebody else around. Anybody remember what parochialism means? That's the next sort of, that's the next level, kind of. You're close. What about Ulbeck? Can you help define what is parochialism? The answer is here, but in your words. Generally, the easiest way to remember this is a baby. You're born and you just know what's around you. You don't know there is another way. You only know one way, one culture. You do it that way. If you get more educated after you go to school, you know there's other ways. That's when you're ethnocentric, but you don't understand them. You still think they're strange. You still think your way is better, but it's only because you understand your way. You've invested every day of your life in your way, and the other way that you are new to, you don't understand it, so it's strange or bad. Only after you invest a lot of time and energy to understand it, that's when you'll be more successful with the globalization. And this is talking about not just Hofstede and his cultural theories, but Laurent is another researcher, and it's showing how countries are different. This is talking about it is important for managers to have at hand precise answers to any questions. When you're in a company, you ask me a question. In East Asia, how important is it if we are in Japan? I, managing this company, must have all the answers. How do I do that practically? The workers at the bottom that might not have as much knowledge about the topic or might not have as much education about the details, they're not allowed to talk to the top. They talk to their manager. And their manager talks to their manager. And their manager talks to their manager until it gets up to my level. And every time you go through a level, their training changes the language so it's more appropriate to talk at a higher level. And so ultimately, when you get somebody asking even a basic question, as it's filtered through, I am able to answer, or somebody at the lower level can answer. So in Japan, the top leaders are supposed to be able to answer anything, versus the Spain, similar. Indonesia, Italy, France, Germany, Belgium, Switzerland, Great Britain, Denmark, United States, Netherlands, and Sweden down here. Does that mean Sweden's bad? No, it's similar to the Scandinavian countries. Almost all of the Scandinavian countries where there's almost complete equality everywhere. This is saying one person is a specialist in one thing, but they completely accept somebody else as a specialist in something else, but we're all equal. A lot of people in Korea and East Asia, Japan, are completely shocked when they see the king of Finland and some of these, the heads of the countries are taking a public bus to work. Where, in Korea, they have like 20 different cars and bodyguards around them just for them. They close the roads. Helicopters are taking them around because they're so special. Versus here, everybody's equal. Anyway, that was identified by Laurent. The main reasons for a hierarchical structure, again, this was describing the culture. This is the same type of thing, the power distance versus collectivism, uncertainty avoidance. So there's a variety here. In addition to that, there's also the trompenar. I'm not sure how to correctly pronounce trompenar, but another European came up with another group of cultural details. Ultimately, you need to know who you are and then how to describe other people. Cultures are complex. There's no one single right way. Cultures are ultimately created in a simple way. Culture creates your values create your attitude creates your behavior, and your behavior creates your culture. It keeps going around. It's not something that is inherited. It's not something you get once and it stays with you forever. It usually is a product of your environment. Your environment can change your behavior. Your environment can change your value. Your age can change some of this. Different groups of people around you can change this. Even inside one country, there are groups of people with different values or attitudes or behaviors. So you can have some countries like India with more than 1,000 different cultures, distinct. Many of them have different languages too. So Hofstede has problems too. A lot of people say he's terrible because of that alone. However, he's one of the most successful, mainly because he does a very good job of managing and promoting himself. Ultimately, you must understand most people talk about being ethnocentric. I know my way and I know the other ways, but they're bad. My way's the best. That's ethnocentric. Somebody in our class was telling me I'm not supposed to talk about Adolf Hitler. I'm supposed to talk about other, maybe Donald Trump. He became very, very powerful, saying we need to do it this way. But he became the most powerful in the world, some people say, even though he didn't understand other cultures, which is bad. You don't want to be like that. You don't want to be like Hitler. You don't want to be like Donald Trump. You need to understand and respect. The other ways that you don't know well are not bad. They're just different. How are they different? So learn about them. This is the SRC. This is the SRC, self-reference criterion. One of your biggest obstacles for international success. One of your biggest obstacles for interacting with other people. Week 6, week 7, week 8, week 9, we're talking about surveying in the class. How are you going to do survey? In Sweden, you can walk up to the king of the country and he might stop and talk to you. If you drop your bag, he might pick it up for you. In East Asia, you got to go through a lot of bodyguards and things like that. You have to go through a lot of formalities to get to the top. And then even then, if you're not that age level, or if you're not that level of success, they still won't talk to you. Unless you're very special. When I came here 25 years ago, there was almost no other foreigners in the country. I think less than 20 in the whole country. So because most Koreans never saw foreigners before, when I got here, I went to the Samsung building because it was the most impressive building in Seoul. And I just walked in and I knew enough about the culture that I just walked by the security guard, said hi, and just kept on going all the way up to the CEO's office. Everybody else is like, who is this guy? And walked in. I was just a young guy, almost your age. But because they've never seen these, they don't know how to manage. Anyway, understand generally your culture can be an obstacle. You need to understand what you think is normal could be bad. So you have to use your understanding, like stereotypes. They could help you to start, but check. This is my stereotype. Is it correct? There's invisible men here. Is it all right for me to only talk to these people, even though you guys that are invisible are paying just as much tuition? Those types of things. I don't know. We need to learn what is good and acceptable. Anyway, there's a variety of different ways. I'm going to get on to show you. We talked about examples. Here is the file. Hofstede is just one, Hall is another, Pluckhorn is another, Trumpeter is another, Schwartz, the globe. Globe is generally the most advanced other than my research. My research is talking about how 51 different countries all have different theories for management and ways of management. It's similar to the rest. Hall is very easy to understand. You're going to notice that a lot in East Asia. That's generally describing language preferences and ways of thinking, centralization of information versus decentralization of information. In Scandinavia, everybody's equal, so everybody has access to any information. In East Asia, all of the information is in one area, just the CEO has it. But it's not just that information, it's also the way of communicating. And they are saying that in East Asia, generally you use one word, but it means many things. Like pegopa could mean hunger, could mean hungry, could mean time to go eat, could mean, are you hungry? Would you like some food? There's many things pegopa could mean, but usually in Korea, people understand it when you say it. Versus in Canada and in Europe, generally you need to use many different words to be specific about one individual topic. It's the opposite, high context versus low context. Don't confuse it. High context is the opposite of using high numbers of words. It's using a high amount of the environment in your communication. So me from Canada, I have low context. I use a low amount of words from the environment, and all of my communication is only in words. High context, low context. Trumpeter is pretty awesome. He has a lot of great examples to work with. These, all their alternatives to Hofstede that we were talking about. And they're explained throughout here. Hofstede. One thing that I wanted to point out is this Asian management in the 21st century. This article that I was promoting, published in a very famous, top-level, highly respected, highly reliable journal, Asia Pacific Journal of Management. Not only is it written by Hofstede, but the culture, it's not just talking about what you're teaching in an abstract, but also look at how he does it. It's really smart, and most people don't talk about it. Most people don't even teach it. So let's take a look at that. So inside here, you know, you should be talking about your theories and stuff and how to improve. But I want to point this out. So how can I show this? Here it is. So this is the article that I wanted to point out. If you guys want to be successful in Japan, Japan is famous for people having lifetime jobs. You go to Toyota, you get into Toyota, your family's set for life. Same thing with a lot of Japanese big companies. We'll talk about that partly today and next week. Korea has been usually following the Japanese style, even though a lot of Koreans say they hate the Japanese style. Samsung started from Japan. So how was this developed? This was saying Asian management in the 21st century depends on which country you're from. And so he generally wrote this, I think it was at 8.5 pages. Generally, he referenced 2 books, basically surveyed something like 25 different people. That's it. Very, very simple idea. But how he did it was almost ingenious. These books that he referenced, one was from a famous Chinese book about how hundreds of years ago, a Chinese successful landlord, for example, like an emperor or a king, wanted to motivate their workers, their slaves, their concubines and many things, how to make them work better, because they're working in the fields, but they're not really growing a lot of potatoes or onions or garlic or whatever. They're not working very well. So they started to say, okay, if you make a lot of garlic or if you make a lot of vegetables, I'll let you own your own part of land. And it had a different reaction. And then he also referenced Tolstoy, Nikolai Tolstoy, their book in Anna Karenina, they did the exact same thing. They took a rich, successful, like emperor government person that had a lot of regular people working like slaves, and they did the same thing. They will give you, or they offered to give you land if you could work well. In China, it worked very well. The people, they thought, really? I'm going to be able to own this? So they worked well. Versus here, some people argue, I don't know if it's true, but so many government officers in Russia were saying, I'll give you this, do this, and I'll give you the reward, but they didn't actually give them the reward at the end. Sometimes they torture or kill the person. So in Russia, they didn't actually work well. It didn't work well. You needed a different type of management. Versus in China, you could just offer this bonus style, equity style. And then he was saying, he surveyed some people from USA, some people from Denmark, from India, from China, and he identified what was the most important thing for management versus what is bad or the least important for management. And what's interesting to see here is personal wealth, almost the lowest in China, is almost the highest in USA. And it's the same thing in between. In India, it's the same. Personal wealth is almost the highest. And in Denmark, it's the same thing, almost the lowest. So Denmark and China are very similar versus India and USA are very similar. So it's very interesting. Anyway, this was the research idea he's teaching the world. If you can do that, that's what most research classes, that's what most English professors say, good, as long as you're going to teach that, that's what your essay is about, is great. But that's only half the story. If you really want to get successful in management, the idea of Japan giving lifelong jobs is a myth now. It does not happen anymore. It's very rare. More and more companies are only getting jobs done by a specialist that can do the job. After the job is finished, they make another job and they hire a new person. Maybe I'm wrong, but I have worked with a lot of CEOs and executives in many different companies, and they're all talking about that. I don't know any that are still talking about lifetime workers. So be prepared for that. How? How can you specialize in yourself? Start to promote yourself as a specialist. Don't just memorize a math textbook or some textbook. As you're doing it, interact with the company you want to work with. Interact with the world that you want to be a specialist in. Write this for you, not for me, not for the university. That's just one thing. Next, how do you write it? You want to publish this so the world gives you respect. If you publish it in a student journal, good job. How many people really care? Some people will see it on your resume. And if you have a publication on a student journal or a student magazine, you will be respected more than another student with comparable grades, but no publication. Research actually shows that companies will hire you even if you have lower grades than somebody that doesn't have a publication. But if you want to publish at a high level, like this Asia Pacific Journal of Management is one of the world's best. What can increase your chance of them accepting your work? He's got like 30 different references. 15 of them are from this journal. How does the world work? Google works now. The more people are talking about you, the higher you get in the Google rankings. The more people are talking about a university, the higher the university gets. The more publications a university gets, the higher the university gets in rankings. So just by having many references to this journal rises in ranking. So the journal should accept it. That's number one. Do you understand what you have to do for this? So if you were writing a paper, you should target a journal you want to publish in, try to keep the same style, try to keep the same format, and reference that journal quite a lot. Next, that's happened just getting published once. Hofstede's idea is even better than that. What about you? How much are you in Google now? You do realize there's more than 1 billion people competing with you in China. What is it, 320,000 or something in Japan? 57 million, millions of people around you're competing with. How are you going to get this job you want? You being a different person, you stand out more than the others. But there are a lot of other foreigners around now. What else could you do? Hofstede is referencing Hofstede. He's referencing himself. So his ranking goes up in Google. Doesn't matter how much other people really know about him. Google is identifying just the numbers, just the analytics, just the big data, and Google is now saying he is being referenced by other people more than somebody that doesn't have references. So he's making himself famous. You should also try to do that. What article did you publish or what article did you write last year in last class? Doesn't have to be fully published, but by referencing yourself, it makes you more famous. Same thing with LinkedIn. When you are going to get a company job, when you're going to apply for it, they will check your background. If you have LinkedIn with not a lot of connections and not a lot of endorsements, they're not going to think you're very valuable. They're not going to think you're very connected. Even a student that is terrible in school, but has 1 million connections in Facebook or YouTube, that student is more valuable to almost any company because they can promote it just to their friends. And it's the same thing, it's the real world in business. You should be thinking about those types of things. Any questions about this? Ultimately, the simple version is just find a good, reliable, respected format and just develop it yourself. A lot of advanced researchers would say that's sort of cheating. You should start by learning the statistics. You should start by learning what is a good research model. You should start by learning this. But that's a PhD. That takes, I don't know, 7 to 17 years. If you just follow what the experts are doing and start replicating that, that's the fast track to get noticed and get success. So I'm encouraging that. Ultimately, the most successful people in social sciences start with this: abstract, introduction, background, literature, methods, results, conclusion, references. Reference as much as you can, as properly as you can, for many different reasons. Then there's different ways you can do this. We were talking about the methods. Week 6, week 7, week 8, week 9, it's talking about your methods. It's talking about your survey. I'm not going to try to focus on teaching you statistics or research methodology. I just want you guys to talk about how you're growing, how you're connecting, how you're actually developing your specialization, how you're able to grow yourself. And it's different in East Asia. Same thing in some of the other classes. Case study is you study one specific thing, one specific company, but in a lot of detail. Generally, you need to have a lot of questions. The more questions, the more data. That means the more you research, you teach the world something new. Here, it's lots of questions in depth to one organization versus participant observation. It's just you asking many questions about your environment. You are participating in Korean lifestyle, Korean education, Korean work. You can start surveying people related to that, but you need to survey many different people. I don't really care, but the high-level researchers, they would say there's special ways to do that. You're not supposed to, you're supposed to focus on surveying the real world. And students don't have the stresses and the responsibilities of the real world. So I will accept student surveys, but you should be trying to get into the companies as much as possible. Ultimately, this. In LinkedIn, if you don't have the connections with them, one thing that you do have is this. This university has millions of dollars in the library, the Scopus material that others don't know is valuable. If you start telling them this is from $30 to $50 on average, sometimes they're $1,000, you could have several thousands of dollars or $100,000 just in research material from the greatest minds, the greatest benchmarking practices to summarize for the company. Some executives should want to see that. But you need to make sure, again, people like Samsung, they might not listen to you unless you're from the best research group or the most respected research group. Samsung likes talking and dealing with the other number ones. They have a number one-ism. It's like Coca-Cola is the same. Coca-Cola will only participate in fund activities if they are the top beverage provided. If you're also selling Pepsi or sponsoring Pepsi, Coke will have nothing to do with you. They have to be number one. No questions asked. Samsung is generally similar. And then if you customize that for the company, saving their time, you should be able to have some connection with them so you can present that to them and get their attention more so than anybody just lining up for a job, anybody lining up just for a basic question. A lot of them in East Asia, that's very hierarchical. They're not supposed to talk to you. I'm a professor, we're in a university. One of the best deans I know of is Korean, and he has a personal thought that he is not supposed to give his name card to students. He's not supposed to generally talk to students outside socially on the street. That is outside of the respected ways. He is only supposed to help you in the class. And so if you want to have meetings with him, you have to contact him through his teaching assistant or through his research assistant. And you can get their phone numbers, you can't get his. It's not a good or bad thing, it's just that's the way it was in Korea for a long time. And it's still generally thought that way. I'm believing that if you don't say you're anything related to a student, you just show you have something of value, like this briefcase of very valuable information, then you will be able to meet them. You will be able to contact them. But then again, don't just walk up as a student. Don't say you're a student. Talk about, you have the Harvard Business Review logos, the Samsung logos, the other competing company logos, something to show you're at a higher level. And if you research those LinkedIn people and you know what they're working on, you know what they care about, and you start connecting with them through what they're doing with a little bit of value, it's a lot easier than just walking up and saying, can I survey you? Yes, Pia.
We actually tried to contact Samsung at the moment, and we did it this way. We presented us as an expert group, and we got like, we showed them that we have a lot of references that we share with them, but we have trouble connecting with them. They don't really answer us. So that's why we wanted to ask how we should, I mean, we will keep trying, but how we should present our findings if nobody answers us.
Okay, let me. Just trying to log in.
Especially on LinkedIn, a lot of Samsung employees have their messages blocked, so we'll try to connect with them through the connection. Have this work.
Okay, so here is my LinkedIn, messages from people, my basic details. If you want, so your question is, you have a LinkedIn account, you're trying to connect with people, but they're not responding. Okay, so my suggestion is to find out more about them to provide something more of value to them. Another example, let's say, well, this guy, all of these guys. This guy is the top executive of Samsung. He's the head of, well, we'll see soon. He He's also a top executive of Samsung. This guy is a top executive of one of India's biggest companies. Let's take a look at this. Oh, before I go on to others, this guy last year in this type of class, students were studying how to interact with Samsung and how Samsung, the students were interested in technologies. I was telling, don't just learn about HR or HRM or international management, learn about technologies and how to manage that. So they studied Internet of Things. This guy managed Samsung's industrial Internet of Things applications, so how companies can use it. And he's trying to find out, he started with consumer Internet of Things, how people can use a Samsung watch or their laptop over the phone. And as they get close to the car internet and my phone internet connect, and the phone and the car automatically unlocks, the radio turns on to how I want, the seat drops to how I want it, the air conditioning goes to how I want it. Same thing when you get close to your home. The car or your cell phone activates the home, so everything readjusts to how you want it. That's all connected to the Internet of Things. And he found out that this guy had moved from Brazil, where he grew that like crazy, back to head office in Korea, and how they're able to focus more on the industrial things. So the students started identifying, what could we do? And he came into class and he was teaching the class with me, and he was saying, okay, we could work with factories. Go to the Hyundai car factory, tell them how all of the workers, we could program their phones so that the phones would know where they are in the company, would know where they are in the factory, and see if there's a problem with producing a car because of some problems. They could identify that. And the Internet of Things would control what's most efficient. Same thing with the customers, same thing with the suppliers. Internet of Things could help with car factories. Or SK oil and gas, when they're making oil and gas rigs and stuff. Internet of Things can improve the efficiency. So he was proposing students start checking into something like that. Because if you learn about it, and I can give you all of the information about Samsung Internet of Things capabilities, we can both be successful. The students were more interested in food safety. So the students started to research how each farm in Korea are basically connected to a farm association, but they're all kind of very low level. So the government has to give them a lot of support to not be in poverty, that's why rice in Korea is one of the most expensive rices in the world, because you have to pay a lot to keep them at a high level of standards. And so they were trying to help the farmers of Korea through this Nomyup association with the Internet of Things. You put a high-tech device in a tractor or even the farm truck going to market, and it will tell you what's the best way to get there. What's the way to save the most gas or create the best harvest when we're harvesting. And so they started to do that, and he was so impressed, he offered these students 500 high-tech devices, computers and the new phones and things like that, to donate, to give to these farmers, and to develop this project even more. The students, as soon as they finished class, they moved on to the next class and they stopped it. They dropped it. So that project is still available if you guys want to develop it. Let's talk about this guy now. This guy is another guy connected. Went through part of my program before. Global talent acquisition at Samsung. Samsung Electronics. So what is he doing now? So we could endorse him. That will take a little bit of time. We should be able to see his activities. If you check, and so in your area, you will have a thing saying just connect for more information. If it's just connect, no more options, it will just ask you to link to him. If he doesn't know you, since he's an international guy, he may connect, but the Korean, Japanese, Chinese guys might not connect if they don't know who you are. So the alternative is you can send a customized, usually in the first time you're not connected with them, it will say give a personalized invite, and you can send a message with details in that message to him. Well, a message is different. This is not a message. Sending a message is only available if you're a member, like what's it called, the LinkedIn Premium. and you have to pay, I don't know, a couple of bucks each month. So you can send a connect, which is just press this connect if you're new, or you can send a message if you're the good paying customer or a VIP customer, or you can have a personalized invite. And the personalized invite allows you to send, I don't know, 3 sentences or a short paragraph, customized link. It's supposed to be designed just for you to say, hi, I'm studying with your son, or I'm studying with your family, I went to the same school, let's connect. And then you'll have a higher option of connecting with you. But you can also use that for marketing yourself. So hopefully that's clear to the world. Let's go to the next level. Before you send that, before you talk to a company, before, especially in Asia, what's the biggest difference between the culture you're from? I'm from Canada. In Canada, it only cares about the quality. What do I know? How can I help the company? If I can show them, I can go, they'll talk to me. Here, it's not that individualism style of company. It's not an individual focused culture or nation. What is the opposite of individual? Here, collective. You have to be collective. So how do you connect with a person in Korea, Japan, or China? You need to be part of their collective group. What are some possible groups? Sorry? Alumni. So you're part of the same school group, university group, high school group, middle school group, elementary school group. They're very, very powerful here. If you're part of that, especially if you say you're part of the student association. If you're just one person, especially if you're a foreigner, an international person they don't know, maybe they're worried about connecting with you. But if they think that you're part of a big group, they're not allowed to really say no. It's not a rule, but the whole culture is designed that way. So they should contact you. So be part of that student association, part of that university association. They should at least give you a little bit of time and help. Other than that, part of their company association or part of their work association. Be part of the group they're interested in. So what parts of the groups are they looking at? Sorry, is there more people trying to get in? No. So activities. So 3 days ago, this student studying HR management, you need to see this. Ultimately, this student, just like you, she said she's been spending 4 years in school. She's applied to almost 500 different jobs, and she got 54 interviews, but she wasn't really successful with them. But finally, she got successful working with Samsung. How? She got, we keep going through it. I was thrilled to announce that I've just accepted a position at Samsung. Carol Wagner helped her, Michael Walters helped her, Lindsay Rice helped her, this institute helped, Becky, Brian, Nell, all of these people helped. And it's not just a thank you to Samsung, which is promoting Samsung, but it's also promoting all of these other people. The more that's written about you, any publicity is, any marketing is good marketing, some people are saying. So this is promoting everybody. This student is brilliant. Some people say, oh, she applied to 500 places before she got accepted. That's terrible. Who cares? She got her job. She wanted to work for Samsung. She's there. And now, just like we talked about that other paper, how did you do it? Don't just work hard, apply, and then just go in. She is promoting Samsung even before she started her first day. And everybody, that group that helped her, she's also thanking. And these are all LinkedIn connections. None of them were basically graduates or university connected to them. And she's also connected to the schools, the same types of schools, even if she didn't go there. LinkedIn doesn't require you to attend that school to be connected with their group. Funny little things how the world works. I'm not telling you to lie. I'm just telling you how the world is working. The world, life is a game. If you understand the game, it's easier to become successful. So she's just talking about this. She's got several comments now. Paul has says, welcome to Samsung. He's the global talent acquisition, wishing you the best. So he's promoting this. I was also promoting this. And here's another story. Here's Paul also likes this. When I was broke and applying to jobs, I couldn't hear back from employees. And there's a story about this. Here's another story that he's talking about, Samsung Electronics America. So, and this is more related to the Samsung real marketing. They made a story. It's not just a story about them. So he is probably saying more related to this. Here's another story. He's probably talking about it quite a bit. Samsung, like he's promoting this, how Samsung's ranked very high. So find out what Samsung is promoting by this guy. What does this guy care about? All of these things. And this is 1 week ago. He likes this. Maybe is it maybe less than 1 week ago? Another 1 week ago. It keeps going back. 2 weeks ago, how they're working with the Korean K-pop and stuff like that. So you can find what he's interested in. Eventually, if you research that organization, whoever's your main target, find out what they're interested in, and then add something of value, connect to that value. Yes?
Is it usually better to, let's say that we find out something that they want someone to do basically, and we do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we do it, and then we message them. Is it better to say, like, hey, I saw that you need someone who does this, so I started doing this? Or is it better to just say, basically, I am doing this without telling them that I am doing it basically because of them?
I don't know the perfect answer for that, but I would break your question down into a couple of different parts, first of all. Number one, we are now in Korea. And Korea not only has individuals trying to do their job, you know they're trying to do the job, you want to do the job, you want to be connected, that's just one thing. But you are looking at the individual fact, individual job, individual task. If it's a Korean person, they need to do their job, but they also are thinking they need to stay in their groups. So you said, I am doing this. An alternative, if you are just coming one person they don't know to contact them, they're afraid to talk to you, even if you have a briefcase full of cash for them. They might think it's a trick. They might think you're an enemy or a spy or who knows. But if you say somebody from your group was talking to me and I have this for you, then you're in their group. Understand? So we started and we showed that one girl was thanking 5 different people, or who are the people that this guy, Paul Hussey, is connected to. If you start talking about how you are connected to the same company, or you are connected to the guys he likes, you have that collectivist connection. It's more comfortable for them to accept you. In Korea and Japan and China, they're focused on their group. And if you're outside the group, you're traditionally, hopefully not very much anymore, but traditionally they were considered spies. You're an outsider, you're an enemy. People are building the walls. It's not just Donald Trump. Korea for 500 years didn't allow foreigners in or out. If a foreigner came in for like 500 years, they would be killed. They're not used to accepting somebody from outside. So try to show you're connected with them as much as possible, at the highest level as possible. That's just a connection. Number two, in Samsung, he is a foreigner, he's an international guy, he should be open-minded, but most Korean, Japanese, Chinese, they're learning not just the Korean culture, but they're learning the Samsung culture. Samsung is not a regular Korean company. Samsung is the #1 Korean company. They have to be #1. So you are supposed to be also a #1. Even if you're a new successful entrepreneur, maybe you've got like a $10 million company that you've started. Samsung is like $1 trillion company. And if you only have 5 people working for you, you're still small compared to them. You're supposed to be connected at the top, at their highest, at their level or higher to be attractive for them to talk to. How can you do that? I don't know the answer, but these are things you can think of. The more you research the organization, the better you plan how you connect with them, the better you will do. Just like we saw with Hofstede's paper. Don't just write a paper, but write a paper that benefits the journal you want to publish it. And it benefits you. So how can you connect with those Crane people? Research who they are, research what they're doing, provide something of value to them, but also break down that barrier and say, I'm already inside your company. I'm already inside your group. I'm already connected to people you know somehow. I don't know who you're trying to contact or what are these details. This guy, he is good. He has worked with many students. Some students provided just, I've seen some students go up and say, okay, how do you spell the name of your company again? There's no faster way to say, oops, the internet's not working. End of interview, right? Make sure you're offering something of value to people when you're talking to them. These people, they don't need to be bribed. I'm not talking about that, but just human nature. Sometimes if they have a lot of energy, I'll talk to any stranger. But if I'm having a bad day or something, you need to make it worth my while. I have gone through and deleted sometimes 200 email in one day. Each day I go through and just delete many, many emails. So they are probably busier than me. I'm not trying to network as much as them anymore. You need to find out what they're interested in. If you're messaging them, they could be deleting lots of messages. What reason do they have not to delete your invite? Even the whole idea of sending an email, you have the subject line. If I delete like 50 email today, many of them, I'm not looking inside. It's just the who's it from and what is the subject line. If somebody's talking about investing in something like that, and a lot of people send me those messages, I'll just delete them. Sometimes I'll play with them and I'll teach them how they're investing the wrong way. But usually I'm trying to find that message. What is the connection? Some students are just saying, I have a survey for you, or can I talk to you for a while? Anybody that says, can I talk to you for a while? They're not a high-level executive. High-level executives, they don't talk that way. You need to talk the language they are used to and they value. Next, as we were talking about, where are the others? Oops, that's here. Bonnie Nam is another. Let's do another search. So he's another guy. Samsung Electronics, connected through. Not help as much now. Connected a lot with me before. He was in charge of HR before. Now it's consumer electronics sales around the world. If you go through and check the details, another thing about activity, you can check experience. What was his job? What is he working on? You can see this stuff here. Before that, you can see also that he was in charge of sales of Apple. So he knows Apple management style, he knows Samsung management style. He can definitely clearly talk to you about those differences. But if he doesn't know you, he may think it's a trap. He may think you're Samsung people trying to check. Education, right? Education. He went through Yonsei. He got the MBA at Yonsei, but he also studied it with Harvard. Some of these students last year, they just got a collection, that briefcase of many different articles from Harvard Business Review. That alone impressed them. He wanted to say, oh, great, I haven't read that for a while. I know it. It's great. I used to use it a lot. Yeah, I want to see those Harvard articles alone. I don't care who you are. You have that. That's what made him go into the interview. They were all focused to what these guys were working on, and then he agreed to continue mentoring. So those are tips that other people have used for success. Hopefully you can benefit from that type of idea too. Any questions about any of this?
Excuse me, Professor. So I think we are almost getting the time to wrap up the class. I think the rest time is good for everyone if they want to ask any questions about the project or anything else related to our class.
Or presenting your, you should be trying to talk, you should be trying to present your stuff each day. I say week 9, you should be presenting, but I'll be generous. As long as you're presenting and trying to improve, I'll give you marks any week that you're trying for the rest of the semester.
Presenting week 9 on Friday, as we're still trying to contact people. It's really hard.
Okay, how? Why don't we talk about how you're trying? Maybe you can show what you're doing. And one of the best things that I've seen is, oh, really? You're trying to connect? He's my uncle. That happens a lot here. Try to find out, like, he's my boyfriend. He's my, I don't know, I'm having an affair with him, something like that. They can open a lot of doors. Personal connections are crazy strong here. Strangers going in, it's usually avoided. Anybody? Look back. No, we have 5-10 more minutes. This week is also talking about the Korean style. So I've talked a little bit about the Korean style. This week we're getting from the Korean style into the Japanese style. You know Samsung style. We've talked about how Samsung is supposed to have the culture of number one-ism. We've also talked about Hyundai is supposed to have the culture of being practical, the blue-collar factory style worker. But Samsung, the executives that started, the founders, they were raised with the Japanese style. They were raised and educated in Japan. They got the Japanese equipment and basically brought it back to start parts of Samsung. However, a lot of people in Korea, they don't talk about it. Samsung is just Korean. Be aware of your research. Find out how it works. So in Korea, we have the chaebol, which is the giant conglomerates. They're all basically started with a lot of support from the government. They're all supported to grow the country. They're all supported to basically have an army of workers, many employees, to help grow this giant, to grow the country, supporting the country and that company. They're not supposed to be arguing too much. Anyway, that's the chaebol, and it's always been basically the same way with the chaebol. As time goes by, it's internationalizing more and more. It's losing the exclusive Korean characteristics and becoming more global, more open. However, Samsung in Korea, what percent of the workers are international? What percent of the sales of Samsung are done in Korea versus international? I would think that if you have 90% of your sales coming from other countries like India or USA and China, you should have 90% of your workers, your staff, your management from those countries. So you're connecting with those values and those beliefs, what they want. Whatever we want in Korea, BTS, Korean K-pop, maybe they like that, but there could be very different ways of really connecting. Japan is similar. Japan has that giant conglomerate. Samsung is a conglomerate. Japan has the conglomerates, Toyota, Nissan, Honda. Pre-war, they were called the Zaibatsu. Now, after the war, they were called the Keiretsu. They're basically the same. A big difference is in Korea, to get inside the family, it's usually family controlled, generally the same in Japan, but in Korea, you have to be blood related. Anybody that marries a non-blood person, a non-Korean person, they are basically becoming a traitor, basically not as loyal. In Japan, as long as you're good for the organization, like being adopted is easier and maybe better in Japan, or getting married in, you're still considered the family. And so they could have some foreign management. Anybody know what went on with Nissan recently? I'll give you some hints. Many years ago, Japan was one of the fastest growing, very valuable companies in the world. Everybody was starting to respect them for quality issues. But because Japan had that Z style management, the Z theory, everything took a long time to change. And when the world went into recessions, Japan went into a recession and almost everything stopped. It took a long time to start growing again because it has to go through a longer way. In Korea, in China, one person makes all decisions, they can grow fast. But in Japan, it was going slow. So they started to introduce new management styles, even though there wasn't still growth. Nissan was basically bankrupt. It's a big car company. They were going bankrupt. They tried every new person in Japan to come in and help run it. But they said nobody in Japan could save Nissan. They were going bankrupt. About 10 years ago, they brought in this other foreigner. A person like in LinkedIn said they were the best manager, the best CEO of the best big conglomerates in the world. He was very famous in Brazil, very famous in Europe, very famous in North America, very famous in the Middle East. Why? Because his parents were partly Brazilian, partly from the Middle East, raised in Europe, raised in North America, raised all over the world. This guy was a true international person, and his LinkedIn profiles and connections were big everywhere. Just like Hofstede, he was promoted as the best. And so Japan brought him in to manage as the new CEO of Nissan. And it went from being bankrupt to he turned it around to one of the best companies in the world again. But now that Japan has no more financial problems and Japan is growing very well, some of the Japanese traditionalists are saying it's strange that this big Japanese company is run by somebody else. That was a huge threat to Japan. Bigger, because he was Carlos Ghosn, I may be saying his name wrong, but Carlos Ghosn, the CEO of Nissan that was non-Japanese, he was also connected to the French company and Renault. And so he was partnering the Nissan with the Renault company and another French company. And that was promising to grow that car company to be one of the world's biggest and best. But it was going to lose that Japanese big flag. And so the Japanese, a lot of people started protesting, saying, no, we can't have that. We want to keep the Japanese for the Japanese. And so ultimately, Japanese started complaining about what he was doing, trying to get rid of him, and they succeeded. They kicked him out. And so he had to actually escape from Japan because there's a lot of criminal files against him. And he had to actually, anybody know these stories? Will it back? No. He actually had to hire ex-Navy Army officers and SEALs to come in and pretend to be rock star K-pop musicians with giant big boxes as big as this with the giant speakers. Got Carlos Ghosn to get inside these giant speaker boxes, carried this into a private Lear jet for the rock stars, and flew to another country that was what it doesn't extradite, so he was able to escape from Japan. And these are true stories, and they're happening now in the news if you check CNN and stuff. Anyway, he's that type of thing. Know what these companies are, how they work, how they manage, how they interact, what they want. For example, when Japan was almost bankrupt and they couldn't find anybody to save, they brought other people in. But now Japan is rich and powerful and successful again, especially when somebody's starting to take their pride and joy and make it not Japanese. What's going to happen? Like Samsung. Right now, Samsung is super big, successful, but it's absolutely Korean. No question about it being anything else. What if Samsung had problems? Apple took over, a new Chinese phone started to take over, Samsung started dropping, and Apple started to buy Samsung. And they were going to delete the Samsung logo. How would the people in the street react? I bet there'd be a huge reaction. What do you think?
I feel like it's being price or suffering, right?
What do you think would happen if there's even a rumor about Apple merging and taking over Samsung? We look at the store, there's an Apple cell phone store, there's a Korean Samsung cell phone store. Do you think people would still keep buying those things? Apple would be kicked out of the country. They'd be destroyed, torched. Yes, that's maybe not true, but that's my belief. So you need to look, who's the person you're trying to work with? How can you connect with them? In Korea, you have to have that connection. It's very strong. The regional connection was very strong 20, 30 years ago. It's getting a little bit less important now. The school connection is still really, really strong. The family connection is vital. You can't really break that family connection. In Japan, the family connection will accept a non-Japanese sometimes. In Korea, it's a little more rare. How many non-Koreans have Korean passports in Korea? I could probably bet 10% of the National Baseball Association or Basketball Association, and that's it. Not many others. Even people that are born here, it's still very hard. Even people that get married, sometimes you marry a Korean, a girl, a foreigner marrying a Korean guy can get a Korean passport only while they're married. If they divorce, sometimes it's hard to keep. A guy, a foreign guy marrying a Korean girl, I think they still can't get Korean passport. I've married a Korean girl, I can't get that Korean passport. So the family details are different. You need to understand those details. Anyway, that's the Zaibatsu, the Keiritsu. We're basically at the end of class. The connections with government are both similarly very strong. One thing that is kind of interesting is the Hakuna Matata. Before we start going through the ownership structure of companies, maybe you're all aware of the Lion King movie, Hakuna Matata. The Lion King, and they're saying, you know, here's to the future, Hakuna Matata. Basically, the lion pride is going to control the future. Well, the Hakuna Matata in Japanese, Amakuda Rai, is slightly different. Generally means the top of the government, the top of the business, and the top of the education work together. If you are connected to the top of that, your life is set. And they help each other. For example, the top CEOs and the executives of the companies, when they retire, they might become the top advisor of a university and a government officer. And the government officer, when he retires, he gets brought in to be an executive in the company and an executive in education. And the top university professors can easily become executives in these companies or in the government. So that three-way triangle is very important. In Japan, it's famous for being part of the University of Tokyo, especially. Korea is almost the same way. If you're with those special connections, it's a lot easier. So before you leave, just remember the school connection is really important. Try to find who is somebody a high level in this university that might be able to connect you with that target company that you want to work with or the government you want to work with, and it should open up a lot more doors. I'll try to stop talking. Any other questions? Can you guys promise me to talk more next class? I don't know if you're interested in this or if you're just falling asleep while I blah, blah, blah. What about you, Ulugh or Jacobir? Any questions from you guys?
No question.
Okay.